G'day everyone, welcome to The Locals episode 2, and we're back here with myself, Ariel. We've also got Jun.
Hey yo everyone.
We've got Nick L.
What's good?
We've got Steve.
What's going on, everyone?
And our guest, and because I said Nick, we have another Nick F.
Hey guys, how's it going?
So, hey everyone, we are back today. We're going to be discussing a couple topics. First off, a few of us went to the RCQ today at Parramatta Gamescube, and we'll have a bit of discussion about how you guys went and what kind of games there were, what meta there was at the Gamescube at the RCQ, and then we'll get into our main topic, which will be discussing our own decks and how we go against Scam. And Nick F is our resident Scam player, so that's why we decided to have him as a guest today. So how about, since both Nix and Steve were at the RCQ competing at Standard as well, just in case you weren't aware, why don't you guys take it away? Tell us, how was the day? How'd you guys go? What decks were you playing, and what was the field like?
Okay, cool. I think I'll go first. So today I played Rakdos Discover. Did pretty good. Top forward. There was about 23 people there. It was a decent turnout for Standard at least. General thoughts, I think the deck's good. Its worst matchups probably Domain, and Sydney here, we have this weird meta where Domain is a little underrepresented, and we have a lot of like mid-rangey stuff, so more like Esper and Demir and all that. Yeah, I lost to my mate Sean Go in the semis. Shoutouts to him. We'll probably have him in a future episode. Yeah, overall, I beat Mono Red, Esper Control, Domain, and Ban Toxic. Undefeated in the Swiss, and I lost in the semis to Esper mid-range.
Yeah, I also played. I was on a Demir mid-range. The Swiss went rather well for me. I was able to get 3 wins, and I only lost to Domain. But my 3 wins in the Swiss were to a Bant sort of ramp pile. It was weird. It wasn't Ban Toxic, and it wasn't Domain. It was
The
some sort of
homebrew
homebrew. Yeah. I saw. Yeah. I played against Gruul Dinosaurs, which played very similar to Rakdos mid-range. I hadn't seen it until today, but I had heard of it. So it was interesting to see it in action. Didn't seem to have many issues dealing with it on Demir mid-range. Counterspells were... Cavern of Souls was Cavern of Souls, I guess. But the removal spells were rather effective. It got rid of everything. Go for the Throat was good. His Low to the Ground stuff was dealt with by Cutdown. All that kind of stuff. I played against Esper Control, and I beat that as well. And I was bundled out I made top 8, but I was bundled out in the very first round against the Demir mid-range Mirror, but playing the other version of Demir, I guess, that I was considering, which is utilizing Invasion of Amonkhet and the Bat God from Ixalan, Akhlazotz, to have the unkillable Akhlazotz combo. That cracked the Mirror wide open. I got absolutely destroyed by that.
What were you running in place of that combo? What was the combo substituting?
So they tend to cut Preacher of the Schism, and I've even seen some lists completely cut Gix. This list, I think, was running 1 or 2 Gixes. And then they go a bit lower on Tidebinders. I think they go for a total of 2 Tidebinders in the 75, whereas I'm 3 in the main. And they go the full 4 Invasion, and then they run stuff like Kitesail Larcenist, I think it's called. It's like a 3-mana 2/3 flyer with Ward 1, and it ETBs and can turn 1 creature on your opponent's side of the board and your side of the board into like a treasure. So
okay, that's interesting.
And so they want to aim to have pieces like that in the graveyard, because even if they usually only run 1 Akhlazotz for the invasion combo, but if they don't get that, they're more than happy to just have a 4/4 Deep Cavern Bat and lifelink flyer that takes a card from your hand, and it proves to be really, really destructive against my version of Demir mid-range that's not running that combo in the mirror. It tore me apart.
Interesting. Would you be down to try something like that out at the next RCQ? Or
I'm thinking of pivoting to that. Yeah, I'm thinking of buying just some picking up some Sleep Coast Fairies and the Invasions and some other stuff, and I'm thinking of building that because I saw it maybe about 4 or 5 days ago, and it looked really interesting, but I stuck with what I already had for this RCQ and ended up losing to exactly that in the top 8 first round.
So I play Soldiers in Standard, probably the premier aggro deck in the format. It's very interesting. It doesn't play like a traditional aggro deck. It's more kind of tempo oriented with counter spells and other value engines like Wedding Announcement. It usually is kind of a mid range killer. It is very good against like Esper and Dimir, but unfortunately, I didn't play against any of them today. I went 2-3, beating a Dimir mid range kind of combo list similar to what Nicholas was describing earlier, Nicholas Farrell, and I beat the Bant kind of homebrew deck as well. I went 2-3, so not kind of the best, especially compared to the Knicks today. Yeah, I'm sure that I'll do better in the future. I'm sure that my time will come.
Yeah, it happens. Just variance overall.
Yeah.
Oh, Sean won that one, did he? The with Dimir control.
I think he won with
Dimir mid range. He took.
Mid-range?
He was, no, sorry, not Dimir. Esper mid range.
Esper
Yeah,
mid-range.
Sean won. Yeah, Esper.
Yeah.
Congratulations to him.
Yeah. It was a really varied in terms of deck presence today. Like there was some stuff that you'd expect if you were to look at like general meta presence, and then there was some real weird piles.
What was the top 8? So the top 8. So it was me, Rakdos, 2 Dimir.
2 Dimir, 2 Bant Toxics.
2 Toxic, 1 Esper mid-range, 1 Mono Red, and...
I think the last person may have been Domain, but I'm not entirely sure.
I don't think it was Domain.
No domains in the top 8.
2 Mono Red, actually. Yeah, not too sure. Overall, we don't have that much Domain in Sydney, honestly. It's kind of weird because when I was working on my list, I had to change the stock list a bit because a lot of the stock list is like pre-bought it a bit for Domain. It's like stuff like Lilies in the main and all that, which kind of suck against like Esper and Dimir just because they have so many like small dudes. So it's
So your deck
interesting.
just wasn't spec'd for what are you going up against?
Yeah. I added like another cut down, stuff like that, just to like deal with lower the ground decks.
Well, as always, next week, boys, is another RCQ, and I'm sure you'll be grinding your way to top 8 again and having another chance. All right, that was a bit of a breakdown of today's RCQ, and then we'll get into our main topic for the podcast, which is going up against Scam, and how do you do that with our specific decks. So myself with the Tron, Jun, I believe you've changed your deck, Jun, is that right?
Yes, I've been playing Burn, and I found that it's quite not good recently in current meta, and so I changed it to blue-white control. I've been watching and reading some Hendrix articles about blue-white control, and he performed pretty well in the recent European Championship, which got me into blue-white control.
We love Yendrik. Big fan.
Big fan of Yendrik.
Yeah,
yes.
I love his stuff on Phoenix last year. Yeah.
So you'll be discussing Blue White Control. Nico, you're going to go with Rhinos again, and Murktide for Steve. And Nick F is going to be talking about Scam and what they're kind of like looking at, and also kind of giving us some tips and maybe some feedback on our thought process when we verse Scam. So maybe we'll start there first. Nick F, do you want to give us a bit of rundown of Scam, and also maybe a bit of rundown about you and your kind of background in terms of how long you've been playing and why you choose Scam as your modern deck?
Yeah, sure. So I've been on Scam for about 5 months now, probably a month or two before the Fury ban. So I did play Scam before Fury was taken out of the equation, and now I am continuing to play Scam post Fury ban. I would say the key thing about Scam, I'm no expert, but I would say from my experience that the way Scam tends to want to play is to reduce your opponent's number of resources, either by forcing actions or by taking them with the grief and the Thoughtseize and all the rest of it, and then using things like the Fable to generate value and consistency, with the general end goal being like a mid-range beatdown plan, because your resources are only so limited, and then it comes down to a matter of my draws are better than yours, in essence. Like, real strict to boil it really down. and there's plenty of ways that can I can establish locks or ways to win the game. So Fable of the Mirrorbreaker is a really big enabler of that. If you have a Fable on the board and a Grief, you can do like these draw step copies to take cards from your opponent's hands, and they can only respond at instant speed. There's that sort of thing. There's the good old Fable combo with 2 Fable and Mirrorbreakers that have been let 2 Reflections and Kiki Jikis to copy each other. And yeah, it's just a mid-range deck that's very unfair.
Would you say that like Scam as a Rakdos mid-range deck for modern, would you say it's kind of like an extension of Pioneer Rakdos mid-range, but just at a modern power level? Because the way you describe Scam, it's kind of how like I would describe Rakdos mid in Pioneer. You want to enforce like a low resource game. You want to like deny stuff like resource generation, like card draw and stuff like that through hand disruption, and then just like play better cards than your opponent.
Yeah, I think it's a very fair evaluation. I would say that it plays very similarly, and I think that if you have a decent amount of experience on one and want to play into the other format, doing so with Rakdos like Evoke Scam in Modern and Rakdos Midrange in Pioneer, it is pretty interchangeable. It's a matter of like power level variance, like you're saying.
I think there's definitely
Especially post Fury Ban anyway, that is very much what it's like, because now you go on main board Sheldreds and that sort of thing. It plays very, very close to a Pioneer list, but on a modern power level, yeah.
I've definitely seen like Scam hands where it's just like Thoughtseize, Fables, Sheldred, and it's just like
they're almost Pioneer legal. Yeah, it's like a Pioneer legal Scam hand.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a solid opener where, 6 of the 7 cards or all 7 of the cards could be like a hand you would see in Pioneer's Rakdos midrange.
Maybe that's a testament to like how good Pioneer Rakdos midrange is, that it's basically modern power level.
Maybe. I'm building it now, so I'll let you know. I'm changing from Rakdos Sacrifice over to Rakdos midrange and gonna give it a bit of a run.
Alrighty, Nick.
Which one? Okay, yeah.
What is your best and worst matchup as a Scam player?
My best and worst matchup in the current meta, I'd probably say my best one would be Amulet Titan.
Why is that?
Why is that? Could you just tell a bit more?
Well, I've actually got very little experience playing against it. I've only played against it a few times myself, but it would seem to be that the disruption that Scam can put forward just halts Amulet Titan in its tracks and doesn't really let it combo off too easily. I've got easy solutions to most of their things. Like, scamming Amulet Titan feels most egregious because their combo hands are so fragile, I guess. So if you can pull away some of those resources, if you can pull away some of those key resources, it feels doubly impactful as it would against a deck with high redundancy like Murktide, where, in Murktide you take away an Unholy Heat or a counterspell or something, and they're going to draw more Unholy Heats and counterspells, and they've got a lot of like selection to get to those. Whereas in Titan, it feels more like they're top decking for the pieces they need once you take them away.
As someone that's played Titan as well in the past, it really struggles against hand disruption because you're really looking for those specific cards to combo off. And if they again, because most of your deck is lands, your top decks are really, really bad. Most of the time you'd be drawing into lands, which obviously doesn't get you anywhere. So in my experience, any kind of decks that do run a lot of hand disruption, another like deck that would really struggle against is like 8-Rack. Can like never beat 8-Rack with Titan. So yeah, stuff like that. I can definitely see why that's a really good matchup for you.
Yeah. For the Scam matchup specifically, I think 2 other cards are also worth mentioning, which is Terminate, offering instant speed Titan removal, and mainboard Magus of the Moon really presents an issue for Titan. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think Titan tends to run mainboard Dismembers or such to remove a Magus of the Moon. They do have the Seju's for Blood Moon, but
they're definitely in the side,
yeah, that's all sideboard material. So if I can bring that one mainboard Magus down, it can almost single-handedly win me the game there by just turning off their whole combo.
Yeah, I believe the way Titan plays that matchup is, I think they're primarily playing through Urza Saga tokens, I believe. I think they want to like jam a ring early and Saga tokens.
Yeah.
Saga's the only card that can't get Thoughtseize, right?
Well, yeah, I can't get Thoughtseize, but if I do get that Magus of the Moon, it destroys all Sagas that are on the board as Sagas. True. Yeah, which is also useful. Niche doesn't tend to come up very often, but when it does come up, it's, game changing. But yeah, the ring is still very powerful. Like it is not just because it's one of my best matchups. It doesn't mean it's not completely unwinnable for Titan. The ring can still run away with a game from Scam because it does exactly. It is the exact solution to what Scam is trying to do, which is like enforce low resources, and the ring can just really ramp you
Oh yeah,
resource wise.
absolutely.
It just
Yeah.
picks up in 2-3 turns. It picks up like 6 cards. It's just undoes all my work as Scam to try and take your resources away, and it can feel devastating to play into that, as well as the one turn of protection. If you drop that into a board that's really ramping up, like if I've got a Grief and a Douthie or something that's presenting a bit of a clock, the ring just pauses that for a turn, and that can really like change the tempo of the game on its own.
Yeah. I mean, I have seen like Titan players do say that the Scam matchup isn't that bad. Like it's like a little bad, but like you have stuff like the ring, which is just like a ridiculous out to like anything Scam has. Like it plays through like Blood Moon effects and all that. So
yeah, of course, yeah, because generic mana, Blood Moon doesn't really like there's no casting cost to affect there with Blood Moon or Magus of the Moon. Yeah, I'd say that the matchup is probably 60-40 in favor of Scam.
I think that's fair. Yeah, definitely.
About
Definitely
that,
like
about
winnable,
that.
but like it's a disadvantage.
Yeah, if they present the turn 3 combo with the Titan or whatever it is, I think it's turn 3 they can do it.
I don't think
I've
they
got
go
no
for the turn 3
disruption.
combo. Yeah, I don't think they go for turn 3 combo against Scam just because of Terminate or representing.
Yeah,
Terminate.
yeah, representing Terminate, of course, yeah.
And what do you feel is your worst matchup?
My
Of
worst
like the
matchup
relevant meta decks, not like
of the relevant, the relevant meta decks. Like, so when you say relevant, you mean like I guess the 5 that you guys
No,
was
like top 10, top 15, not like some like.
Oh,
TNT
okay, top 10, top 15.
Let's say like mill or something. It's like.
Yeah, no, okay. Funnily enough, Burn can feel egregious to play against because it's such high redundancy, and the Scam never really takes away anything of great import. It just saves me a few life points, I guess. Living End is definitely one to worry about. Rhinos.
Do you think Living End is bad as Scam?
Pre board, I think Living End can be bad. It depends on if I get basically hinges on Douthie.
That's fair.
If I can get a Douthie in the graveyard so that I can recycle the Living End, that's good. If I can get a Douthie on the board by like turn 2 to kill their cycle so that they're not like reanimating a huge graveyard, that's also good. But without the Douthie, the Living End matchup Living End can run away with it pretty fast.
What do you think of Scales and Full Color?
Four Color, I've post bans, I've had a couple of games against Four Color. It has been hard fought but winnable. I'd probably say 50-50. And Scales is certainly my worst matchup. I've played it a handful of times, 5-6 times now.
Okay.
And I think I've lost like 4 or 5 of them. I think I've won like once. Won once, drawn once, lost like 4 times.
I mean, yeah, definitely. Like Scales is like the king of like redundancy, specifically for Scam. But yeah.
As a Burn player, when you said you thought that Burn matchup is hard, if I, as a Burn point of view, if I get turn 1 Grief and you take away 2 of my Burn spells and I have 5 cards, I don't think I can outrace against Scam. I feel like I have difficulties against Scam when I just get turn 1 Grieved.
Yeah.
Turn 2 Dorothy.
And the big point there is you're actually spending a 3rd card to kill the Grief as well. So you're investing 3 cards.
Yeah, the Scam can swing that, but if I don't have the Scam, it can get really bad really fast. Because like I turn 1 Ragavan or turn 1 Thoughtseize and I burn myself. Thoughtseize becomes like my worst card in the matchup because I burn myself to take a burn spell, so it's sort of pointless.
Like 1 life, pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. If I Thoughtseize to take a like a Skullcrack or something, I'm up 1 life point. If I take a Boros Charm, I'm up 2. It feels like a bit of a waste. I mean, like post board, I cut the Thoughtseizes, so. And if I turn 1 Ragavan, you can bolt the Ragavan, and it's like a 1-for-1 in that sense, which is pretty much what Ragavan's there for. But I don't know. Yeah. In my experience against Burn, it's just felt like a hard fight.
If I'm on the draw and you play a turn 1 Ragavan, I immediately have to respond with a Burn spell to kill the Ragavan. You can take another Burn spell from my top of my deck and burn me, and you get a treasure, which is...
Yeah, when you talk about the interaction, are you implying that the 1-for-1 trade is winning for Scam or for Burn? Because you're saying
I would say it's no. Okay, yeah, that's a fair point. I realize how I said that now. Yeah, no, I would say it's the 1-for-1 trade with Ragavan, like Ragavan for a bolt, is probably it's winning. It's definitely winning more than Thoughtseize taking something.
Yeah, because I
Um,
play Burn too, and I think it is very winning for Scam. If I have to
Yeah,
Ragavan.
yeah. The turn one scam or turn one Ragavan that eats a bolt is winning for scam. But I fail to see short of an unanswered brief. So if I scam, let's say, and then there is no bolt or skewer the critics or something to go at the grief and get rid of it, or a bolt or something to answer the Ragavan when I play it, it feels very easy for Burn to still run away with the game if they can answer those things. And then if they don't answer them, it feels like, oh, I can run away with the game very easily. I don't know. It's a bit. I've only played it a few times as well. Due to the way we play, we've got a high variance of decks, so I haven't really played much beyond Rhinos and Murktide with high consistency.
Have you played against my Burn? I feel like we've played, right?
Yes, we have. Yeah.
I don't remember our like general record though, but I do agree that Burn
neither
is
do I.
winning. But I wouldn't say that it's like very winning. I guess I'd say it's like,
No, it's not catastrophic. Yeah, but
definitely
it's
not like
slightly
worst
favored.
matchups, but yeah.
Nah, slightly favored.
Talking about Murktide, how do you see it, Steve? You playing Murktide?
Versus Scam. I think last time I said Scam was unfavorable. I think I still agree with that, but I don't think it's not catastrophic. It's certainly beatable.
So what are you looking for? Like,
what's your general game plan?
Yeah.
Yeah, what's your approach? Like, if you had to like let's say you drew 7 cards and you knew it was Scam, like, what are you looking for in that hand?
Removal spells, probably the best card in the matchup turn 1, especially on the play, is something like Stern Scalding. But otherwise, just removal spells. You cannot really afford to mulligan against Scam, especially these days with only the Grief Scam. So yeah, you just keep removal spells, you keep some creatures, and you hope to top deck into some preordains and iterations. But otherwise, when you draw 7, you just gotta.
What are those?
Just gotta pray.
What are you like particularly hitting with the removal spells? Like, what creatures does Scam have that's just like screams like you have to kill this? Like, you're specifically keeping removal to answer this like immediately.
Dauthi,
other than like the Grave Scam, obviously.
Yeah, Dauthi is probably the biggest target. It's this kind of main deck incidental graveyard hate. It turns off my Delirium, turns off my my Murktides. So yeah, I just got to answer it. If they can manage to get an expressive iteration under the Dauthi with wood counter, then it's a lot of value that they're getting. So I would like to prevent that.
I think the Murktide Scam matchup is really interesting. There's a lot of nuance to it. Like, from your perspective, if we talk about like through like a theory lens, like a who's the beatdown kind of analysis, who would you say? Which side would you say is the beatdown?
I think Scam is just getting down a 4/3 menace on turn 1, or a Ragavan or a Dauthi kind of needs to be answered. So I've got to kind of hold my bolts, hold my not my express iterations, my Unholy Heats, and deal with those creatures, because my end game is a lot more powerful than theirs. If I can drop an 8/8 Murktide, then short of a Terminate, they don't have a whole lot of ways to deal with it. And obviously, if they are going to terminate it, I should be holding a counterspell to help protect my Murktide.
So you'd say that in general. So I guess like the way that you're framing it is, you're trying to answer early threats and then develop a hand that can play a big Murktide holding counterspell to cover it. Is that kind of the gist?
Yeah, just play just kind of follow their game plan, play pretty grindy, and hope that they can't outvalue me with stuff like Fables. And if they can, then kind of answer those threats and just keep up the tempo. Keeping tempo against Scam's Murktide is extremely important. You can't let them get the initiative. You can't let them kind of outvalue you with stuff like Fables.
That's fair, yeah.
And when you go to game 2 and 3, what are you looking to bring in, take out?
Mm-hmm. How does the matchup change post-board?
It really varies from play to draw. Obviously, because of their turn 1 Grief Scam, I really got to change what I'm doing on turn 1. I'm pretty much never playing a Ragavan on turn 1, especially on the draw. Even on the play, I'm really never playing it because getting a bolt is just like we mentioned with the Burn matchup. It's losing, especially with Murktide. On the play, I'm going to bring in stuff like Stern Scalding and Unlicensed Hearse to help prevent the Grief Scam. The Stern Scalding prevents the turn 1 Grief Scam, and Unlicensed Hearse prevents any future Grief Scams. And then I'm just bringing out just stuff that's bad for the matchup, stuff like Spell Pierce and Change the Equation. Change the Equation is a relatively new card to the matchup. It's usually like a 5th counterspell, but it's really not hitting anything in the matchup. It hits like maybe a Fable, but that's about it. But otherwise, on the draw, my plan completely changed. So I'm bringing in Casting to the Fire to maybe get a 2-for-1 for, like a Bowmasters and a Bowmaster token, or a Ragavan and a Bowmasters. Bring in the Stern Scalding again, and the Unlicensed Earth, just for similar reason for on the play. On the draw, I'm also bringing out my Ragavans, because they're pretty horrible on the draw.
What would make Ragavan better on the play than on the draw? So if I'm understanding you correctly, the intuition is you always want a turn 1 pass to represent a
removal spell or Grief Answer.
So why would you play Ragavan on turn 1?
I pretty much never do.
Okay, so then what's the benefit of keeping it in the deck?
Pretty decent in the late game, especially if you can dash it. Dash Ragavan in the late game helps.
How does that differ from play draw if you're only using it later in the game?
On the play, you've got a bit more of a tempo advantage. You've got the initiative, you kind of control the game, whereas on the draw, you have a little bit less of that tempo. You have to rely more on your removal spells to kind of control the game more, whereas when you're on the play, you're still controlling the game, but you can still kind of afford to, play a little bit more aggressively, slightly more aggressively.
So how does that actually translate into the game? So let's say you're on the play, post board, you turn 1 pass, and then turn 2, what do you do? What's an ideal turn 2 play?
I think Ledger Shredder Bauble is a really nice play, although that's kind of a very nice draw. That's ideal.
But couldn't so Ledger Shredder couldn't the scam player just hold their scam opening and still on turn 2 then, and not turn 1 if you're going to tap out on turn 2?
They could. It's very much dependent on what they do. It really depends. Every game is different, whether they scam on turn 1 or hold the scam or whatever else.
Yeah, I guess the point I'm getting at is I guess turn 1 passing is kind of the antithesis of taking a tempo initiative, I guess, from my perspective. I feel if you're gonna pass turn 1, you kind of have to commit to that.
And play a more controlling game.
That option, to that line, yeah.
Steve, if you're not holding a Stern Scalding or a Spell Pierce or an Unholy Heat or something to deal with that turn 1 Grief Scam in the scam matchup, you're against scam, and you don't have any of those pieces, are you still turn 1 passing there to try and represent it? Because I think regardless of if you've got the open 1 mana or not, if I've got the Grief Scam, I push for it on turn 1.
I think
if you hold an open mana and I've got the Grief Scam and a Ragavan, I might play the Ragavan turn 1 to see if I can bait out that removal and then go for the Grief Scam on turn 2. Other than that, I can't really see a scenario where I don't push for the Grief Scam on turn 1 regardless of open mana or not. So do you hold an open mana if you've got no answer to represent that you've got an answer?
Like you mentioned, you just kind of jam regardless. So I don't think...
Yeah.
I mean, we did mention earlier that mulliganing against scam is kind of a death wish. You just kind of keep whatever you have. But if you know you're playing against scam, you really need a turn 1 answer on the play to prevent that 2-for-1. It's just kind of vital that you need a turn 1 answer as Murktide to just hold something up and pass, because, like you said, the scam player is just going to jam regardless, hoping for an answer there. Not hoping for an answer, but anticipating an answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question is, if you don't have... Yeah, so, would you still represent? So I guess you're saying, you don't represent because you're assuming that the scam is going to jam it anyway if they have it?
I think that you have to have it. You represent because you have it.
But, if you don't have it,
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, if you don't have it.
But, bluffing having it if you don't have it.
Yeah, I don't think there's any harm in not doing that. Because the alternative is turn on Preordain, turn 1 Ragavan, Channeler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're holding like a Channeler or a Ragavan or a Preordain and you don't have an answer to the scam, do you bluff having the answer, or do you just like do your turn one Ragavan or Preordain or whatever?
I think you'd still have to bluff, because even in the corner case that the scam player doesn't jam, you're still getting the advantage there. They're still fearing that, and the initiative is with you in that scenario.
I guess. Do you mainboard Stern Scolding?
These days I don't, but I do play 2 in the sideboard.
Because other than Stern Scolding, you don't actually have a clean answer to the scam.
Yeah,
Because
you would need 2 answers to the scam.
You need double heat or double spell pierce or spell pierce and heat. Because
Some combination of
some combination there.
answers.
Because if you don't have 2 of them, I take the answer with the grief scam and then do the scam, and so like it goes forward that way. So you actually need some combination of double heat, double spell pierce, or heat and spell pierce. Or Stern Scolding is the only like 1 card clean answer in Murktide. But if you're mainboarding that game 1, that's interesting. I guess it's certainly a good choice to make if you anticipate a strong scam meta.
I was playing it mainboard for a while, but scam was on the decline. But yeah, you just kind of have to have it. Same with scam, you just kind of have to have the turn 1 scam against some decks, and in some cases, same with Murktide, you just got to have the answers on turn 1.
Yeah, I mean, I think like that's what makes scam oppressive, is like it demands answers from the opponent, but it also punishes them pretty hard for like mulliganing to find those answers. I think that's what makes scam like a strong deck.
Yeah, I think that's what it like brings it up to that modern power level, is its ability to like
Yeah,
simultaneously demand answers. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 100%. Where it demands answers, but then says, "But if you mulligan to find them and then don't find them, you are even more screwed."
Another card that's pretty interesting in the matchup is Subtlety. These days I'm playing 2 mainboard. That's another answer to scam, but
it's a pretty good one.
Yeah, pretty good. You evoke your black elemental, I evoke my blue elemental, and we just kind of trade off like that. But evoking Subtlety is really not ideal. With Murktide, you want to keep as many cards in hand as possible. You really want to be able to hard cast in the late game rather than go down on card advantage early game. I'm not a huge fan of Subtlety, and the reason is the same as Force of Negation, where you're going down on card advantage in a deck that doesn't accrue that much card advantage. Despite that, Subtlety is still, it's an answer.
I'd argue it's the opposite. I think Murktide's like one of the best decks at like gaining card advantage. Like they have like 3 or 4 Preordain, like 4 EI.
Preordain isn't card advantage; it's card selection. Expressive Iteration is the only real piece of card advantage in the deck.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. That's true.
Yeah, Preordain is card selection. You've got stuff like Channelers to help select your card. You've got Preordains, you've got Considers if you want to run those. But the only card that really nets you cards is Expressive Iteration.
That's true, but I would argue to that point that Murktide is built around finding the EI. So even though EI is like a quote-unquote 4-of in your deck, like the probability of you like actually landing on one in a game is like much higher than like just a generic 4-of card, because when you need EI, you can dig really hard to find it, and I think that's what makes it good. Like I think like Murktide against Scam, like once you play like 2 or 3 EIs in a game, you've just like gained back all of the missing cards you lost.
Yeah,
and that's basically how you win. Like I think like the end game setup that we discussed earlier, like with like the Murktide holding counterspell, I think you only arrive there through chaining EIs, which like the pre-games and like Darcy triggers and stuff look for.
Yeah, late game EI into Murktide holding counterspell is something else.
Very different
in the scam matchup. Yeah, but
despite that,
it can very quickly spell game over.
It's the key in that matchup, the EI.
It's the most important card.
Yeah.
I would say the entire. I would say it's the most important card in the entire deck. I don't think Murktide's a deck if EI like wasn't in it.
Even like not even against scams in general, Iteration is such a powerful card. It really carries the deck.
I mean, considering the fact that there isn't much draws in Murktide, but you still have to worry about Bowmasters and Scam. They can grow and keep pinging you, and also with Shieldred as well. If they manage to get Shieldred on the field, they'll keep taking I don't think Murktide
is a clean answer to Shieldred.
It does have Unholy Heat.
Because it's a 4/5.
Unholy Heat, which requires Delirium.
Delirium,
And they only have 4 of those, so
Yeah.
But again, same.
And post board, I am bringing in tech to
Yeah.
disrupt that
What does-
delirium as hard as I can.
What does the scam post board look like?
Against Murktide. Oh, okay. Well, Leyline of the Void is what I'm currently running,
Yeah,
so
that's a good
that
one.
definitely comes in. I've got 3 of them for now. I debated the idea of 4. I'm right now, so yeah, but right now I'm sitting on 3. I bring those in against I pretty much cut Thoughtseize, because it feels less impactful, because if I don't take an EI or a removal spell at like a critical moment with it, it feels rather uneventful, I guess, or like it just doesn't feel like a proper 1-for-1. Because the high redundancy of Murktide just makes Thoughtseize bad, effectively. And I also cut the main board Magus of the Moon, because Murktide is able to play through a Magus without issues.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So those come out, and I bring in pretty much Leyline of the Void. And I mean, I was on 1 Shoulder in the main, 1 Shoulder in the sideboard, so that used to come in the Murktide matchup as well. I've now changed over to, or I'm now going to be changing over to 2 Shoulder in the main with none in the side. So it'll be interesting to see how my sideboard decision change with that, I guess, or like what I bring in now instead. But I do have currently a Colligan's command in the sideboard, which does come in because of the unlicensed hearse. So, just over the course of the game, Murktide postboard might not even have to resolve a big Murktide if they just exile enough cards with the unlicensed hearse and then can through it, and it's like a 8/8 or like a 10/10 or something. It represents a very similar threat to the huge Murktide, where it's just like 1 or 2 attacks and the game's over. And so the Colligan's command can answer that, I suppose. But I'm probably thinking of changing that as well soon. Probably taking
Yeah.
Colligan's command out of the sideboard altogether.
Yeah,
Colligan's Man
big
is just a pretty good 2-for-1,
big
but
fan of
that's
taking it out.
about it.
I
Yeah.
think Cage Man is awful.
In modern it feels not great. It's never bad, but never feels great either. It just feels like a
Yeah.
constant 5 out of 10.
That's a great way of describing it.
How
It's
about we
stable
move-
at being a 5 out of 10.
How about we move on to Rhinos?
Yeah, Rhino Scam is pretty interesting. I wouldn't say, it's like super multifaceted, but I think the big thing with that matchup is I think it relies on really specific cards on both sides to make the deck function. I think on Rhino's side, you really just want to. I think the most important thing is you need to kill Doughty. I think killing Doughty is probably the most important thing. I don't think the deck can win through a Doughty. I think because obviously with the interaction when you cascade and then the Doughty gets it, and then if they have an Undying, they can Undying the Doughty and then cast the Footfalls twice, and it's a mess. So number one thing that I think overall beatdown wise, I think Scam's on the beatdown. I think eventually
Agreed.
because I think Rhinos has 8 cascade spells. Like even if you thought sees grief, whatever the hand, eventually I'm gonna draw into one. And pre-board, Scam can probably play through 1 cascade, but they can't play through 2. They just don't have enough answers. So game 1 pretty cut and dry. I think post board is where it gets really interesting. I think the matchup completely changes, actually. I think Scam brings in maybe like 4 to 6 hate pieces at this point. Something like 2 Chalice, 2 EE, that kind of like a mix of that, right? And like other stuff as well that they're trying. Legion's End. I know, Nick, if you were telling me about this.
Yeah. Scam has been trying some Legion's Ends as like a answer to Rhinos now that Rhinos has spiked a bit more in popularity. Which in effect functions as like a sorcery speed engineered explosives and gives me a look at your hand because of the way the card works.
Yeah.
Clears all the Rhinos in one go and gives me a look at your hand, which if you're still holding a few cards can actually be really, really good. It lets me know if there's another cascade coming up, if you're holding some like Force Negation or something like that. So, well, if you're holding a Force Negation, you're going to counter it, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so post board, I think the matchup completely changes for Rhinos. I think we're less committing to the Cascade plan and more committing to a fairer mid-range plan. So things like Endurances, Murktide, stuff like that, I think that's the avenue to go. I think one of the key cards in that, well, the 2 key cards, I guess, post board are the Endurance, because they stop a Scam, obviously. But they're also just a 3/4 that, frankly, like Scam, they don't have the greatest answers to it. It goes over Lightning Bolt, blocks Doughty, etc., etc. Endurance and Flame of Venor. I think Flame of Venor, just having a divination killer dude as well, is big. It also clears up the chalices, stuff like that. Good stuff. I think like playing that sort of style is the way to go. I think like trying to jam through like chalice and EE and all that is just like it's really hard. That being said, I do think post board is good for Rhinos. I think the matchup improves a little bit. Just because you're kind of like deading a lot of the answers that Scam draws, right? Like if you're like on the endurance plan and stuff like that, the chalice is kind of just like whatever. To the point where I think like looking through a lot of like other players as sideboard guides for Rhinos, a lot of them have been like cutting Violent Outbursts, which is like pretty interesting. I don't know if I agree with it, but definitely see the logic there.
I feel like Violent Outburst is quite broken because turn 3 you hold up your mana, you do it on their end step, and if they answer it, you have another cascade spell on your step.
Yeah, of course.
Rhinos.
Like when Outburst is good, it's amazing. But if we're talking post board against Scam, if there's a chalice on the board, it's like the worst card to draw. Because again, like going back to Scam's philosophy, right? It's like it's trying to incentivize a low resource game. Every card in your hand matters, and if your Violent Outburst is dead, then it's really dead. Because even like when you're like clearing the way to actually try to resolve a cascade, so doing something like a end step, Flame of Venor or Brazen Borrow Bounce or Besaju or Otawara Bounce on their chalice, untap cascade, you'd rather that be the Shardless Agent because you want the 2/2, right? So I think cutting Violent Outburst before Shardless Agent is the way to go if you're going to go that route.
Makes sense.
I was going to ask, is the 2/2 body of the Shardless Agent worth playing it at sorcery speed? Hence the cutting of Violent Outburst over Shardless Agent.
I'm kind of indifferent to it, honestly. Like a 2/2 is a 2/2. It's not the best thing, but it's not like the worst thing in the world. I think when it comes to playing against mid-range decks like Scam, I think card quality matters over how lean the card is. Like it being instant speed, I think I would always take the 2/2 in a matchup where you just want card quality, right? You just want to draw better cards, top deck better cards, just higher card quality, and like blocks Ragavan, which is here and there.
So what about the control matchup, John?
Well, I'm currently playing the Days Undoing combo blue-white control. I felt like blue-white control before the Fury ban. Oh no, I mean Scam before the Fury ban. It was much easier to play blue-white control. But after the Fury ban, they brought more. They have a playset of Fable, more bolts to respond to my Solitude. Bowmaster still being there. I think it's a 50-50 matchup. I always need to keep my mana to counter the Bow Masters against Scam because I have a lot of draw outlets with my Days Undoing, Preordain, and I have play 4 copies of the Ring. That Bowmaster will be just keep shooting you down, and then will keep amassing. I only have 1 subtlety in main and 1 this sideboard. I can't really do much against the first game against Scam when I get Scam in the first, because he would take if I have force, he would take the force and then he would take spell like Solitude.
Yeah, Solitude and Force Negation are your 2 outs to the Scam in game 1, I guess. Well, Solitude if you have the pitch and to evoke it, and Force Negation if you also have a blue card to evoke to pitch for it.
What do you think of Force of Negation against Scam? Like obviously Bucks the Scam, sure, but like in general, because I think when I'm sideboarding as Rhinos, it's like the first cut I make easily. I think as Rhinos, Force is terrible. I think like 2-4ing yourself to like stop like an Undying effect or maybe Fable, that's probably the best one. I think it's just not good enough at all.
Yeah, for me, I actually decide Force of Negation. It's quite useless. I'm losing too much value.
Yeah,
I could
exactly.
use too much value.
Yeah, so it's the same there. I also like, especially for control, I've played a bit of the deck. I think most of like the card advantage cards that you actually want, I think they're all blue. So not only does the force 2-4 on yourself, but it's also 2-4 in like the cards that you actually want.
And then I feel like doing the Nase combo is too slow against Scam as well. They can easily answer with Bowmaster when I'm trying to do Days Undoing early, where I don't have mana left. Turn 3 or turn 4, if I to have it all the pieces in my hand, and they just flash it out the Bowmaster, and I take 7 damage, and they have a 8/8, which can kill me just on their turn. So, like Murkta, I have to put in 2 Scolding and Subtlety and take out the Force. And also, additionally, even if I do board wipe, Scam can easily just respond with the Undying effect.
Yeah, in the blue-white control matchup, the Undying effects outside of the Scam can feel really, really bad to hold on to because they become edge case cards. All your removal except the Supreme Verdict is Exile, Leyland Binding, Prismatic Ending, that sort of thing. So they can feel really dead.
So then we got my matchup, I guess, next and last, which is Tron into Scam. And don't forget, like, in the context of the RC with an open deck list, I would be definitely playing it differently than if I was going to a game blindly. But if I'm versing Scam, it depends on the play and the draw and what I'm looking for in my opening hand. If I'm on to play, then having 2 of the Tron pieces and a map is what I want to keep. And I don't really care what else is in my hand. I'm just looking literally for those 3 cards because then I know I can play the turn 1 map without getting it Thoughtseize or scanned out of my hand. And if I am on the draw, then I'm really, really wanting all 3 of my Tron pieces to get natural Tron would be completely ideal. Or I'm looking for much like lower mana stuff, like the maps and the stars, the ancient stirrings, those kind of things to help me get my Tron pieces. Because I think once Tron has their Tron pieces out, then the top decks are going to be much, much better and really impactful in the game against Scam and Scam's top decks. And that's the only way I can kind of win against Scam is cutting like my really big threats on the board once I have Tron, and hoping also that they don't run out their one of Blood Moon or Magus on the Moon. So that's going to be a really hard kind of game 1.
Speaking as someone with no experience with Tron, I feel like one of the most interesting cards in the matchup are the Stars and the Spheres. They let you store a card on the battlefield, which I think is very interesting. I think that a turn 1 star, a turn 1 sphere with an opponent's turn 1 Grief Scam, I think is extremely interesting. It lets you store a card on the battlefield to use later in the game. How do you feel about that?
Exactly, that's what I'm looking for. So that's what I don't want to see my stuff that are my payoffs. I want to be looking for the stuff that's going to get me to my payoffs. Even if I've got like if I don't have the lands in my hand, then I want to have the stuff that will find me those lands later in the game, and stuff that I can, like you said, put on the battlefield, where it's a map or a star that I can use later on to get me that advantage, that card advantage, is really important. And also digging through cards with the Ancient Stirrings is also important to get some selection. But really what I'm looking for is just getting that Tron online, as you always do with Tron, getting that online as quick as possible. Because with my deck, I've got the Eldrazi Temples as well, and I'm really not looking for that game plan going against Scam. I'm not looking for the turn 2 Thoughtseize for Thought-Knot Seer because it's too slow. So I'm really not looking for that kind of hand where I have Eldrazi Temple, Thought-Knot Seer, or Reality Smasher, because in this particular matchup, that is very, very slow because one, they can just take away my Thought-Knot Seer, which means on turn 2, I've got nothing to play, and therefore I can't play my bigger threats later in the game because I don't have my Tron pieces. So I really don't like to see the Eldrazi Temples in this matchup. Not saying that, I'm going to cut them out in game 2 and 3, but what I really, especially in an open deck list, really looking for is those Tron lands and ways to make sure I get the Tron if I am on the play and if I'm on the draw, making sure that I have a few options there that are the lower curve cards in my deck that can get me those draws and stuff like that later on in the game.
So just hoping you have Tron as soon as possible, and then hoping to top deck stuff like Rings to accrue that card advantage
Yeah.
you lost earlier in the
Yeah.
game.
Yeah, because what they're going to do is they're going to take away. They're not going to care either about the big stuff. So they're going to take away the map. They're going to take away the ring. They're going to take away Khan. They might not even take away like the Thought Not Seer or the Reality Smasher, because they can probably know that I won't be able to get there until later on anyways if I'm not able to get to my Tron lands, or if I don't have the Eldrazi temples. And two, they can just kill especially the Thought Not Seer, just get the draw off that. And usually they're not too concerned. I feel, I don't know, maybe you can jump in on this, Nicholas F. But I feel like you're not too concerned with getting a Thought Not Seer against you.
No, probably not. It doesn't seem too devastating. If I open up a hand and I see Natural Tron, Khan, Ring, Thought Not Seer, and Traumatic Sphere or something, I'm not looking at the Thought Not Seer. I'm looking at that Ring and that Khan. The Ring can generate that, like as we said earlier, the Ring in Titan and in Tron can generate that, like all that work I do to make you go low on resources just undoes all that. And I think Khan has thus far been a bit of an unsung hero, because once Natural Tron is established, Khan feels like one card that you pick up that has 15 modes on it, because
Yeah.
it can go digging in your sideboard for one of 15 different things that all, like one of them is probably going to be the answer you need.
Yeah, and that's why
And so even if you play, if you play your Khan, go into your sideboard, grab that answer, and then I kill the Khan, it doesn't matter because he's now picked up that card that you really need.
And that's what I was saying. Like, this matchup is really, if I get the Tron out really early, turn 3 Tron, then it's like I'm definitely in the game. Like, I've got the advantage of getting that, drawing off the top a card, draw off the top a ring to get more card advantage, draw off the top, the big Khan or All Is Dust, something that will just absolutely be backbreaking for any deck, really. It's really, at that point, I think my draws, my top decks, are just going to be too much for a scam deck to go over the top with. The only way they can really stop me is getting that Blood Moon or Mega Sun Moon down on turn 2 or 3, which would obviously be very difficult in the first game with only one Boseiju mainboard, and then Khan getting a Haywire Might out, which is again a bit slow. It depends if I draw into that as well. So it's a bit harder in that game 1 if they do play it. Game 2 and game 3, I'm obviously bringing in the Boseijus and another Haywire Might. And I'm definitely taking out like the Ulamog, probably the Ugin as well, because I'm expecting them to bring in another 1 or 2 more copies of Blood Moon effects. And I think I'm going to be having to need to think about, if I do get Blood Moon, I don't want to be stuck with an Ulamog, stuck with an Ugin in my hand that I can't cast at all. So those are coming out game 2 and game 3. And probably even thinking about, I've got 3 chalices main. I might even take 1 chalice out of the main as well, and put that in the sideboard for game 2 and game 3. Because chalice, for one, is good against scam, but again, they do most of their damage in that first turn with the scam. So a turn 2 chalice, usually they've already done a bit of damage there, and it's not like something that you 100% need in this matchup, I feel. So I'm okay with like taking 1 out and putting in the sideboard and keeping 2 main.
Yeah, a turn 1 chalice. Sorry, not turn 1 chalice. A chalice on 1 can feel a bit brutal depending on my hand. I do have a good selection of 1-drops, but it can be played through depending on my board state when it's here. Like if I scam and then you drop a chalice on 1 the next turn, it's like I can probably play through it.
Yeah, and especially if in game 2 and game 3, if you bring in like Colligan's Command or something like that, that gets rid of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you actually play through a turn 1 scam?
As a Tron player.
Yeah, as your build of Tron.
Well, again, look, if I'm playing it blindly, it's going to be harder if I don't know if I'm versing scam. But in this scenario where we go into the RC, I'm going to be actually going against probably what a lot of people have been talking about today. But I'm going to be mulliganing heaps. I'm going to be mulliganing to make sure that I've got a natural Tron, or definitely at least 2 of my Tron pieces in my hand. Especially if I'm again on the play on draw, I'm looking for that map on the play and the 2 pieces. And if I don't have that, I want to make sure I have maybe a Boseiju in my hand as well. So if I have a Boseiju and a Tron piece, then it might be keepable. If I don't have a Boseiju, I've only got one Tron piece and another type of land, then I'm probably mulliganing to go and get at least 2 Tron pieces or 3 would be ideal again. Because if I've got the three pieces, Tron pieces, then I didn't care if they scam me because like I get the Tron down, turn 3, and then it's just top deck mode. And like I said, I just get a bit of luck there, obviously, what you draw. But what I do draw is going to be impactful enough that it can win me the game.
Okay.
So what's an example of that?
I can get like a ring off the top, and then that gives me card advantage. And then it also stops them for a turn. And then because I've got so much mana, I'll probably be able to play, 2, 3 things the following turn off the draw. And then you got your card as well, bringing stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think at that point, I'd assume that scam, like the turn that you resolve your ring, either turn 3 or turn 4, scam's already gonna have a board that's like pressuring you, your life total. So
I've got the Aula's Dust. That's also really obviously good because it gets rid of all their threats. You've got your the only difficult thing is the menace on the Grief, because like I can put down like a Rally Smasher or a Thought Seer to block like Ragavans for days, but the actual Grief is a bit harder because I have to obviously have 2 blockers there. But in general, like I said, like you can get like Khan just to exile it, like the big Khan. You can get also the spatial contortions also will work in this scenario as well. The +3 -3 pretty much kills any of their creatures. So there's some stuff.
Yeah, I'd say obviously like with Scamtron, like in terms of like a beatdown, who's the beatdown context? Like obviously Scam's the beatdown because they need to close the game before you have your big mana. But I feel like let's say like a example open like turn 1 Ragman or Scam, turn 2 Doubthy, turn 3 Fable. How are you like?
You really at
I
that
don't
point
know
you
how
really
you're playing. I don't know how you're beating that.
At that point you really need turn 3 Tron, and you need to be getting your One Ring or Aula's Dust. Because early game, your only thing you got, and again, if you have to probably draw into it, would be a Spatial Contortion. Because they'll see that, they'll probably get rid of it if they see that in your opening hand. So that's obviously luck dependent when you draw into that. Or hopefully you can maybe Ancient Stories into it as well. But
in terms of
really
like
all you've kind of got, or a Chalice on turn 2 can slow them down a little bit. But yeah, you're really you're just really looking to get that Tron up and running, and then you're hoping that you get those top decks that you need.
Would you say you're more playing
swing
to
the game
board?
into your favor and then take advantage there?
Would you say you're more playing towards the board, trying to match their board presence, like by playing like mid-rangey, like Eldrazi dudes? Or
No,
are you more
I don't
just
think
like
so.
building up
I
for like?
don't think you can in this matchup. You can't really go the Eldrazi. Like I said, you can't go the Eldrazi Temple route. You can't go that more aggressive route because
you're more just playing like hard control, like looking for sweepers.
Yeah, 100%. The Thought Seers, like I said, they're pretty much just a blocker for Ragavans and the like armies and Bowmasters, but they're not really doing too much in this matchup because they're probably not keeping much in their hand, especially if they scam you turn 1. They probably don't have much in their hand that's going to be something that you really need to take. Yeah, I feel like even a Rally Smasher, like it might be a bit too slow because by the time you put a Rally Smasher down, they've probably already hit you with Grief, definitely at least once, maybe even twice. So you're already way behind in that race as well. So they're just really the blockers, and then hoping that you can get into that Aula's Dust, and then once the Aula's Dust comes in, then you can use them to close out the game.
An interesting point that I wanted to talk about, I guess, would be that you mentioned that that you in an open deck list scenario you would be mulliganing for your natural Tron or like 2 Tron pieces and a map or something like that, right? Would you say that the threat that Scam presents in like not want I guess the fact that Scam presents that like don't mulligan threat to a lot of decks, do you think Tron is a bit better off in that scenario, or like we're in the fact that it can mulligan? It doesn't have to be so scared of that. If I mulligan and then get scammed, the game is over, sort
Yeah,
of
I
thing.
definitely think so because you're not so much like a cascade deck. Like my experience playing Living End against Scam has been that I feel Living End is not so much favored in that matchup because you can get rid of the key pieces, and then you've also got the Delphi Voidwalker that brings in another complexity into that matchup. So same thing with like Rhinos, you can get rid of their key pieces. So any decks that look at being really combo heavy, that's a really good matchup for Scam because that's basically what you're doing is ripping a hand apart to slow them down enough that they're not doing their crazy turn 3 play where they pretty much win the game. Whereas Tron never really wins the game on turn 3, but they start getting so much advantage from turn 3 to turn 4 to turn 5 that they run away with the game in that scenario. And again, like the Blood Moon and the Magus Moon, especially Magus of the Moon is probably a bit harder to play through because I've only got the 2 answers in the main board, apart from, and it's probably too late getting a Khan and a Walking Ballista at that point to get rid of it, or a Aulur's Dust, again, turn 7. You're never going to get that far by getting 7 lands on the battlefield in a Tron versus Scam matchup. So that's going to be difficult to get through a Magus of the Moon in that scenario as opposed to a Blood Moon. Because in other matches, like if I was to see, the Eldrazi Temple is Thought Not Seers, like against, for example, Rhinos, like that's a really good hand. But against Scam, it's not a good hand. I want to like mulligan that hand for sure.
Right. Yeah. And so you do think that Tron is a little bit more resistant than other decks to that threat of mulliganing against Scam. It has a little bit more wiggle room, I guess you'd say.
There's no way for them to get rid of your lands. So if you've got the natural Tron, then I feel like that puts you in a really good position to win that game.
Okay, interesting.
If they're not playing the Blood Moon on turn 2, turn 3, obviously, because then that's obviously the other kind of complexity of that matchup is the Blood Moon effects. Any final thoughts from anyone about this particular matchup before we wrap things up on our locals podcast?
I think like as a quick summary, like for each of our decks, what would you rate the Scam matchup? So for me, I'd say Rhino Scam's probably 50-50 at this point. I think the overabundance of tech that Scam's running right now like really clears up the matchup, which was previously maybe like a 55-45, maybe like last year or so. But I think nowadays probably 50-50 is pretty fair.
I'd agree. It's pretty much the same for Murktide. If you can draw into your answers, then it'll be pretty good. But otherwise, it might be an uphill battle. But otherwise, it's about 50-50.
Yeah, it's blue-white 50-50 as well.
Yeah, these seem like pretty safe answers.
I think everyone's saying 50-50.
It is tough.
I mean,
how do you feel about them from your perspective?
From my perspective, I mean, yeah, blue-white control can feel pretty even. I'd say, I don't know, maybe I'm a little bit favored because I've got enough threats that they have to be worried about in the form, the Bowmasters, there's a Scam, there's those sort of things. I guess a Dauthi can also be interesting if I Dauthi and Scam or Thoughtseize and take away like a Leyline Binding or something, or a Teferi or something like that. I can start using their own things against them, which can prove pretty effective. Teferi and all that, making them play at sorcery speed really hurts for them. I would say I might be slightly favored, 55-45, otherwise pretty even. Rhinos, again, also pretty even. Murktide, pretty even. It's the most unfair deck with the fairest win rate. It's pretty 50-50 in most matchups. It feels, with the exception of some outstanding ones. Titan, more favored. Yawgmoth, now that Fury is gone, definitely feels unfavored. I feel on the back foot against Yawgmoth. Tron's interesting. I'd probably put Tron maybe a little bit favored, if not pretty even. I would say, yeah. Oh, and Hardened Scales now has started to fall off, but that is one matchup that I would hate to see always. That is a painful matchup to play into.
So it's a good sign for all of us having pretty even matchup rates against Scam.
I think so, definitely for us going to the RC, and we're going to probably see, expecting to see anyways, a lot of Scam players. I think our decks pretty much have a chance against Scam pre and post board. And it's always going to be dependent on if they have, the specific cards to beat you. And in open deck lists, I mean, that might probably be something to factor in as well. Them knowing what you're playing, so maybe they might be, looking for that Blood Moon against my Tron deck. Maybe they are making sure they get that turn 1 scam against Murktide, stuff like that. So it'd be very interesting, but I think definitely, especially coming from your perspective, I think having you be part of the discussion and kind of breaking it down from your point of view also helps us as well in terms of preparing and thinking about the matchup in itself. So thanks for being on the podcast today, Nick. It was really good getting your insight into the scam matchups for our decks.
Yeah, no problem, man. Happy to help and feeling pretty good. Hopefully I can be on here again sometime.
It'll be great to have you again in future podcasts. And thank you for everyone for listening. That's it from here from the locals, and we'll see you all next week.